Camden Walsh nearly fumbled his champagne flute as his eyes landed on her across Northwestern University's manicured graduation grounds. It was Valerie Washington, his former housekeeper, the woman he had professed to love, then unceremoniously abandoned 15 years prior when his family, dripping with old money and influence, threatened to cut him off from his inheritance. The mere sight of Valerie wasn't the earthquake that shattered his carefully constructed world. It was the young woman locked in a warm embrace with her, a radiant graduate, her face a near-perfect replica of Camden's own. The same startling green eyes that had haunted Camden's dreams, the stubborn set of his jawline mirrored in her youthful face, and that confident, slightly mischievous curve of her lips when she smiled. Madison Washington was 21 years old, placing her at precisely the right age to be the daughter he had never known existed. While Camden had been meticulously building his real estate empire, brick by calculated brick, Valerie had been single-handedly raising their child, juggling a trifecta of jobs to ensure she had every possible opportunity, including a top-tier college education. Now, Madison stood as the valedictorian, poised to embark on her journey to Harvard Law School, completely unaware that the man observing her from across the manicured lawn was, in fact, her biological father. The revelation was a punch to the gut. Camden's mother, a woman who wielded power like a weapon, had coldly paid Valerie a sum of $50,000 to vanish, threatening to obliterate her life if she ever dared to reveal the pregnancy. Now, Camden found himself at a crossroads, facing a monumental choice. He could remain hidden in the shadows, allowing his daughter to continue despising the phantom of a father who had abandoned her. Or, he could fight for a relationship, a daunting battle that could either mend his fractured family or irrevocably shatter the empire he had painstakingly built on a foundation of lies and deceit. Sound of upbeat music fades in, then fades slightly to background. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your support fuels us to bring you even more compelling narratives, and trust me, you definitely won't want to miss what's coming next. We've got some real tearjerkers and heart-pounding stories in the works. Music fades slightly. Now, let's dive back into the story. The champagne flute in Camden Walsh's hand nearly slipped entirely as he observed the graduation ceremony from the plush VIP section of Northwestern University's picturesque lakefront campus. He had initially attended to witness his nephew, Tyler, receive his MBA. However, his attention was completely ensnared by a woman positioned across the lawn, a figure that sent a chill down his spine, colder than the champagne he was holding. Valerie Washington stood near the family seating area, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo, framing her face in a way that accentuated her cheekbones. She wore a simple, yet tasteful black dress that couldn't quite conceal the radiant pride emanating from her very being. She looked undeniably older, perhaps wiser, and certainly more refined than Camden remembered from their time together. But there was no mistaking it. It was her, the woman who had meticulously cleaned his family's opulent Weka mansion for 3 formative years. The woman he had secretly fallen deeply in love with, stealing moments in hidden hallways and moonlit gardens. The woman he had callously abandoned 15 years earlier when his parents issued their ultimatum, threatening to sever him from the family fortune completely. But it wasn't merely Valerie's presence that made Camden's world tilt precariously on its axis. It was the young woman she was now embracing with unrestrained affection, a breathtaking graduate in the traditional cap and gown, whose face served as an almost unsettling mirror image of Camden's own features. The same striking emerald green eyes that seemed to pierce through pretense, the same determined jawline that spoke of unwavering resolve, and the identical way of tilting her head ever so slightly when she smiled. A gesture Camden recognized from countless family photos displayed throughout his meticulously designed penthouse apartment. Uncle Camden? His nephew, Tyler, suddenly appeared beside him, still adorned in his graduation robes, a celebratory grin on his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Camden found himself speechless, struggling to breathe, and utterly incapable of processing the scene unfolding before him. The young woman, who couldn't have been older than 21, threw back her head and laughed at something Valerie whispered in her ear. 21 years old. Precisely the age to be. Who is that? Camden managed to croak out, his voice barely audible, as he gestured subtly toward Valerie and the graduate. Tyler followed his uncle's gaze. Oh, that's Madison Washington. She was the valedictorian of the undergraduate class this year. Brilliant girl, I hear. Double major in business and pre-law. Summa cum laude, the whole shebang. She's already been accepted to Harvard Law School with a full scholarship, no less. Madison Washington. She carried Valerie's last name, but she wore Camden's face. Do you know her personally? Camden inquired, his voice sounding foreign, even to his own ears. Not really, but everyone on campus knows who she is. She's kind of a legend around here. Worked 3 jobs, I think, to pay her way through school. Plus, she started a non-profit that provides refurbished laptops to underprivileged kids in the city. And she gives motivational speeches about overcoming poverty and adversity. The girl's a powerhouse. Tyler studied his uncle's unusually pale face with growing concern. Are you okay, Uncle Camden? You look really weird. Camden continued to watch as Valerie handed Madison a small, exquisitely wrapped gift. Both women were shedding tears of pure joy and unadulterated pride. In the background, Camden could discern other family members. An older woman, likely Valerie's mother, her face etched with years of hard work and resilience. A teenage boy who bore a striking resemblance to Madison, suggesting he was her younger brother. A whole, complete family that Camden had remained utterly oblivious to for over 2 decades. A daughter he had never had the privilege of meeting. I need to go, Camden announced abruptly, handing Tyler his half-finished champagne flute. But the reception hasn't even started yet. Everyone's expecting you. I'll catch up with you later, Camden insisted, already pushing his way through the throngs of celebrating families, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. As he drew closer, he could hear Valerie's voice, warm and overflowing with pride, as she spoke to Madison about their post-graduation dinner plans. I'm so incredibly proud of you, baby girl. Your grandmother would have been so happy to witness this day. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom, Madison responded, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. All those double shifts you worked, all the sacrifices you made for me. I know it wasn't easy raising me alone, she finished. Alone. The word struck Camden like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. It was at that precise moment that Valerie looked up and saw him standing 10 feet away, frozen in place like a deer caught in the headlights. The color instantly drained from her face, leaving her looking pale and fragile. For a moment, neither of them moved, locked in a silent, unspoken battle of wills. Mom! Madison, sensing a shift in her mother's demeanor, turned to see what had captured her attention. When her eyes met Camden's, he saw his own shock and confusion reflected back at him, magnified by the youth and innocence in her gaze. Hello, Valerie, Camden managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. Camden. Valerie's voice was carefully controlled, betraying none of the turmoil raging within her, but he noticed her hands were trembling ever so slightly. What are you doing here? My nephew graduated today. Tyler Walsh, MBA program. Oh. Valerie glanced nervously at Madison, who was now looking back and forth between them with undisguised curiosity. Madison, this is Camden Walsh. He's a family friend from a long time ago. Family friend. The casual dismissal of what they had once shared, the depth of their connection, stung Camden far more than he had anticipated. Nice to meet you, Mr. Walsh, Madison said politely, extending her hand towards him. Congratulations on your nephew's graduation. As Camden took her hand in his, he felt as though he had grasped a live wire. Up close, the resemblance was even more uncanny. Madison had inherited his mother's delicate nose, his father's stubborn chin that spoke of unyielding determination, and his own eyes, down to the small, almost imperceptible fleck of gold in the left iris. Congratulations on your own achievements, Camden managed to stammer. Valedictorian is quite an accomplishment. Thank you, though honestly, I had great motivation, Madison responded, smiling warmly at Valerie. My mom always told me that education was the one thing no one could ever take away from you. The words hit Camden with the force of a physical slap. Education was the one thing no one could take away. But he had taken everything else. He had taken himself, his support, his presence from both of their lives. Madison has been accepted to Harvard Law School, Valerie said, her voice regaining its strength and resolve. Full scholarship, of course. That's incredible. Camden looked at his daughter, and he was increasingly certain that's who she was, with a mixture of profound pride and devastating, soul-crushing regret. What kind of law do you want to practice? Civil rights and social justice, Madison answered, her eyes lighting up with an unmistakable passion. I want to help people who don't have voices in the system. Too many families get crushed by corporations and wealthy individuals who think money makes them untouchable. The irony was not lost on Camden. His daughter aspired to fight against people exactly like him. A noble calling, he said quietly. Madison believes in fighting for the underdog, Valerie said, and Camden caught the sharp edge in her voice. She's always been fiercely protective of people who get taken advantage of by those with more power. The subtext hung heavy in the air between them. Madison might not know who Camden was, but Valerie was making absolutely certain he understood exactly what she thought of men who abandoned women and children when things got complicated. Sound of typing on a keyboard. Have you ever run into someone from your past who completely changed the trajectory of your life? How did it feel to see them again? Let me know in the comments. Well, Madison said, glancing at her phone, we should probably get going. We have dinner reservations and Grandma Ruby is making your famous chocolate cake for dessert. Actually, Camden found himself blurting out, driven by an almost uncontrollable impulse. I was wondering if I could speak with your mother privately for just a moment, about old times. Madison looked to Valerie, who nodded reluctantly, her eyes betraying a flicker of apprehension. I'll meet you at the car, sweetheart. This won't take long. As Madison walked away, Camden watched her move with the same confident stride he had inherited from his father. When she was safely out of earshot, he turned back to Valerie. She's mine, isn't she? Valerie lifted her chin defiantly, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and long-suppressed pain. She's mine. I raised her. I fed her. I worked 3 jobs to put her through school. I was there for every scraped knee, every childhood nightmare, every triumph, and every disappointment. That's not what I asked. It's the only answer that matters, Valerie retorted, her voice laced with steel. Camden ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, struggling to process 21 years of missed birthdays, bedtime stories, and father-daughter dances. Why didn't you tell me? Valerie's laugh was bitter, devoid of any humor. Tell you what, Camden? That the maid you were slumming with got pregnant? That you had a responsibility to someone you'd already made abundantly clear didn't matter enough to fight for? That's not fair, Camden protested weakly. Fair. Valerie's voice rose, threatening to break. Then, she caught herself, glancing around to ensure Madison was still out of earshot. You want to talk about fair, Camden? Fair would have been you standing up to your parents when they threatened to disown you. Fair would have been you choosing love over money. Fair is not showing up at my daughter's graduation 21 years later and acting like you have any right to answers. I tried to find you, Camden said desperately, the words tumbling out in a rush. After my parents cut me off, I tried to track you down, but you'd moved. You'd vanished. I moved because your mother came to my apartment and offered me $50,000 to disappear and never contact your family again. Valerie revealed, her voice trembling with barely suppressed anger. Camden felt as though he had been punched squarely in the stomach. What? She said if I ever tried to claim that you were the father of my baby, she'd destroy my life and make sure I never worked in Chicago again. So I took the money, moved to Milwaukee, and raised Madison by myself. I did what I had to do to protect my daughter. Valerie, I swear I didn't know, Camden pleaded. Of course you didn't know, Camden. You were too busy inheriting Daddy's real estate empire and pretending I never existed. Camden stared at her, seeing the woman he had once loved, now buried beneath years of accumulated hurt, hardship, and the relentless challenges of single motherhood. What's she studying at Harvard? What are her plans for the future? Why do you suddenly care, Camden? You haven't cared for 21 years. Because she's my daughter? Camden said fiercely, his voice resonating with a newfound conviction. And because I can see that she's brilliant and ambitious and everything I would have wanted in a child if I'd been brave enough to choose differently. She doesn't know, Valerie said quietly, her gaze fixed on the ground. About me? I mean, I told her that her father was someone I dated briefly who wasn't ready for the responsibility of a family. So, she thinks you abandoned her willingly. Didn't I? The accusation hung heavily in the air between them, laden with years of unspoken resentment. Camden desperately wanted to deny it. He wanted to launch into a lengthy explanation about the suffocating family pressure, the threats to his inheritance, and the fact that he had been a scared, immature 25-year-old who had been raised to believe that money and status were infinitely more important than love. But Valerie was right. Whatever the circumstances, he had abandoned them. I want to be a part of her life now, he said quietly, his voice filled with a desperate plea. It's far too late for that, Camden. Is it, Valerie? Is it really? She's going to Harvard. Valerie continued, her voice unwavering. She'll need financial support, of course. We don't need your money, Camden, Valerie said sharply. Madison earned that scholarship entirely on her own merit, and I've been diligently saving for her expenses since the day she was born. But I could help, Camden persisted, ignoring her protests. Oh yes, Camden. The way you helped when she had pneumonia at the age of 6, and I worked double shifts to pay the exorbitant hospital bills? The way you helped when she desperately needed tutoring in calculus, and I cleaned houses on weekends to afford it? The way you helped when she cried herself to sleep at night, wondering why her father didn't love her enough to stay? Each word Valerie spoke was like a knife twisting deeper into Camden's chest, reminding him of the countless ways he had failed them. Valerie, please, Camden begged, his voice cracking with emotion. No, Valerie said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. You made your choice 21 years ago, Camden. Madison has made it this far without you, and she'll make it the rest of the way without you, too. Camden stood frozen, watching as Valerie walked toward the parking area where Madison was waiting patiently beside a 10-year-old Honda Civic, probably the nicest, most reliable car they could afford after years of scrimping and saving. His daughter was scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that her entire world was about to be irrevocably altered, or that her biological father was standing a mere 50 yards away, finally understanding the true, devastating cost of the choices he had made as a young man. With a newfound sense of purpose, Camden pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Jennifer, I need you to research someone for me. Madison Washington, just graduated from Northwestern, accepted to Harvard Law School. I want to know everything. Where she lives, where she works, her grades, her extracurricular activities, every single detail you can find. Sir, is this for a potential business investment? Jennifer inquired, ever the diligent and efficient assistant. Camden watched as the Honda Civic pulled out of the parking lot, carrying his daughter further and further away from him once again. No, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. This is personal. As he walked back towards his own car, a sleek Bentley that cost more than Valerie probably made in 2 years, Camden realized that seeing Madison at graduation wasn't an ending, but rather the beginning of the most important, most challenging fight of his life. The fight to prove to his daughter that he was worthy of being her father, even though he had spent the past 21 years diligently proving exactly the opposite. 3 days later, Camden sat in his spacious downtown Chicago office, staring at a private investigator's detailed report that made him feel physically ill. Madison Washington's entire life, meticulously documented, laid out before him in stark black and white. Honor roll every single semester, part-time job since the age of 14 to contribute to the household expenses. A perfect record of unwavering achievement built on raw determination and her mother's tireless sacrifices. Mr. Walsh, his assistant, Jennifer, announced, knocking softly on the door. Your 2 p.m. appointment is here. Camden looked up from the report, momentarily confused. I don't have a 2 p.m. appointment. Madison, Washington, Jennifer clarified. She called this morning and said she needed to speak with you urgently. I wasn't sure, but she sounded very insistent. Camden's heart skipped a beat. Send her in, Jennifer. Madison entered his office wearing jeans and a simple Northwestern sweatshirt, looking nothing like the polished graduates and high-powered executives who typically sought meetings with him. Yet, her posture was undeniably confident, her expression resolute. Ms. Washington, this is unexpected, Camden managed to say, trying to regain his composure. I'm sure it is, Madison responded, her eyes unwavering. She walked directly to the chair across from his expansive desk and sat down without being invited, her gaze never leaving his face. I did some research on you after we met the other day. Camden Walsh, CEO of Walsh Properties. Net worth approximately $400 million. Graduated from Northwestern 24 years ago. Took over your father's real estate empire when he died 5 years ago. Madison paused, her eyes boring into his. What I couldn't find was any record of you ever being married or having children. Camden felt beads of sweat forming on his forehead. What exactly are you asking me, Ms. Washington? I'm asking why my mother turned white as a sheet when she saw you at graduation. I'm asking why you looked at me like you'd seen a ghost. And I'm asking why you have the same eyes as me, the same nose as me, and the same stubborn chin that I see staring back at me in the mirror every morning. The directness of her questions took Camden's breath away, leaving him momentarily speechless. Madison had inherited more than just his physical features. She had also acquired his sharp intellect and his ability to cut through the pretense and get straight to the unvarnished truth. Madison paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Camden, are you my father? The words hung in the air between them like a tangible challenge. Camden looked at this brilliant young woman who had built herself from nothing, who had earned her way to Harvard Law School without ever knowing that she was, in fact, the heir to hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, he said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and profound regret. I believe I am. Madison's carefully constructed composure cracked for just a fleeting moment, a flash of raw pain, seething anger, and a sense of vindication before she quickly pulled herself back together, masking her emotions behind a wall of carefully constructed indifference. How long have you known? I suspected when I saw you the other day at graduation. I was certain after I had you investigated, Madison. You had me investigated? Madison's voice rose, betraying her outrage. Are you serious, Mr. Walsh? I needed to know, Madison. I needed to know the truth. You needed to know what? Whether I was worthy of your acknowledgement. Whether I was smart enough or successful enough to claim as your daughter. Is that it? Madison's voice dripped with sarcasm. Let me tell you something, Mr. Walsh. I graduated valedictorian without your help. I got into Harvard Law School without your connections. I built my entire life without your money or your name or your influence. Camden saw flashes of his own fiery temper in her anger, his own unwavering pride in her fiercely defensive stance. I know you did, Madison, and I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. Don't. Madison's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a shard of glass. Don't you dare say you're proud of me. You have absolutely no right to be proud of accomplishments you had nothing to do with. You're right, Madison. You're completely right. I don't have that right. So tell me, Camden, why didn't you fight for us? The question came out raw and vulnerable, stripped bare of all pretense. My mom is brilliant and beautiful and kind. I'm your child. Why weren't we worth fighting for? Camden closed his eyes, remembering the weak, privileged 25-year-old man he had once been, more afraid of losing his inheritance than of losing the woman he claimed to love. Because I was a coward, Madison. Because I let my parents convince me that our relationship was temporary, a fleeting phase I'd eventually grow out of. Because I foolishly chose money and societal status over love and family. I made a terrible mistake, one I have regretted every single day since. And you regret that now? Every single day for the past 21 years, Camden confirmed, his voice heavy with remorse. Madison was quiet for a long moment, studying his face intently, searching for any telltale signs of deception or insincerity. "What do you want from me, Camden?" she asked finally, her voice guarded. "I want to be your father, Madison. I want to help you through law school, support your career, be a part of your life." "It's too late for that, Camden," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Is it? Is it really?" "Yes, Camden. It is. And you know why?" Madison leaned forward, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "Because I already have everything I need. I have a mother who sacrificed everything for me, who poured every ounce of her love and energy into making sure I had every possible opportunity. I have a grandmother who taught me to be strong and resilient, to never give up on my dreams, no matter how difficult things may seem. I have a younger brother who looks up to me, who inspires me to be a better person every single day. I have a full scholarship to Harvard Law School and a future I am building with my own hands. But I could buy me things," Madison interrupted, her voice dripping with scorn. "Open doors for me with your powerful connections? Give me money I didn't earn or connections I don't need." Madison shook her head, her expression resolute. "I don't want any of that, Camden." Camden felt his heart breaking into a million pieces as he watched his daughter reject everything he had to offer, everything he thought she might want. "Then what do you want from me, Madison? I want to understand why you're really here. Why now? After 21 years of not caring, why do you suddenly want to be my father?" Camden thought about lying, about concocting some noble reason that would make him appear more sympathetic and less selfish. Instead, he decided to tell her the unvarnished truth. "Because seeing you the other day at graduation made me realize that you're the best thing I'll ever be connected to, Madison. And I threw it all away for money and the fleeting approval of people who didn't truly love me. Seeing you made me see what I had lost. So, this is really about you feeling better about yourself, isn't it?" "Partly, yes," Camden admitted, his voice filled with humility. "But it's also because you're my daughter, Madison, and I love you. Even though I have absolutely no right to. Even though I understand you don't believe me. You don't love me, Camden. You don't even know me." "You're right, Madison. You're absolutely right. I don't know you, not really. But I love the person I can see you're becoming. I love your sharp intelligence, your unwavering determination, and your refusal to be impressed by wealth or status. I love that you want to fight for people who don't have a voice, that you want to make a real difference in the world." Madison's expression softened slightly, a hint of vulnerability creeping into her gaze. "How do you know what I want to fight for, Camden?" "Because your mother raised you to care deeply about justice and equality. And because you have a good heart just like she does. Don't try to get to me through my mother. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Madison. I'm trying to tell you that I see who you are, and I'm genuinely amazed by it." Sound of a gentle, reflective piano melody. "What would you do if a parent who abandoned you suddenly wanted back into your life? Would you give them a chance? Or would you protect yourself from further heartbreak and disappointment?" Share your thoughts in the comments below. Madison stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, her back to Camden. "Do you know what the worst part was, Camden? Tell me, Madison. Growing up thinking that my father took one look at me and decided I wasn't worth staying for. Wondering what was wrong with me that made him run away. Spending countless nights crying myself to sleep, wondering if I wasn't good enough to be loved. As a child, that's all I wanted." Camden felt tears burning behind his eyes, a wave of guilt washing over him. "Madison, there was never anything wrong with you. You were perfect then, and you are perfect now." "Then why did you leave, Camden?" "Because I was weak and selfish and stupid. Because I cared more about what my parents thought than what I knew in my heart was right." Madison turned back to face him, her expression unreadable. "What would you have done differently, Camden? If you could go back in time, what would you change?" "Everything," Camden said without hesitation. "I would have married your mother. I would have told my parents to go to hell and forged my own path. I would have gotten a job, any job, and worked my way up instead of taking the easy path through family money. Most of all, I would have stayed and loved you both, no matter the cost. And now what, Camden? What do you want now?" "I want a chance to know you, Madison. Not to be your father in the traditional sense. I understand I forfeited that right a long time ago. But maybe to be someone who cares about you, who supports your dreams, who's immensely proud of your accomplishments without trying to control your life or change who you are. Without changing anything about who you are, Madison, you're better than I ever was. You're the person I should have been. Madison sat back down, her expression thoughtful. I'm going to Harvard in the fall, Camden. You know that, of course. I know, Madison. I also know you are getting a law degree. I'm going to study civil rights law and probably spend my entire career suing people like you. Camden, she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. I hope you do, Madison, Camden responded earnestly. Someone needs to hold people like me accountable. And I'm not interested in your money or your connections or anything that comes with being your daughter, Camden. I don't need them. I understand that, Madison. But, Madison said quietly, I wouldn't mind getting to know you, Camden. The real you, not the rich guy version that the world sees. I want to understand where I came from, why I am the way I am. And I would like to learn about my family history. Camden's heart leaped with a fragile sense of hope. What would that look like, Madison? Coffee sometimes, maybe lunch. Perhaps some honest conversations about real things, not superficial small talk about the weather or the stock market. I'd like that very much, Madison. And I want you to apologize to my mother, Camden. Really, Madison? Apologize? I had every intention of apologizing to Valerie. Apologize, Camden. Not just a mumbled, sorry I got caught, kind of apology. A real apology. Of course, Madison. I owe her so much more than an apology. And I want to know about your family, Camden, my biological grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. I want to understand the whole picture, even the parts that are uncomfortable or ugly. Camden nodded slowly, knowing that the thought of explaining his family's role in keeping Madison away from him would be incredibly difficult, even painful. There's something else you should know, Madison, he said carefully, choosing his words with caution. About why your mother and I lost touch. What is it, Camden? Camden took a deep breath and told her everything. About his mother's visit to Valerie's apartment, about the $50,000, about the threats to destroy her life if she ever contacted the Walsh family. Madison's face went through a rapid succession of emotions. Shock, disbelief, anger, hurt, and finally a chilling cold fury that Camden had never witnessed before. Your mother paid mine to disappear, Camden? To keep her child from knowing who her father was, or what she had the right to? Yes, Madison, he admitted, his voice barely audible. And threatened to destroy her life if she ever told me about you? Yes, Madison. So, not only did you abandon us, but your family actively worked to keep us apart? Madison paused, her voice tight with rage. That is beyond despicable. Madison, I swear I didn't know any of this. I didn't know what my mother had done until your mother told me at graduation. But you know now, Camden. You know now what kind of person your family really is. Don't you? Yes, Madison. Madison stood up again, pacing back and forth in front of the expansive windows, her mind clearly racing. Is your mother still alive, Camden? Yes, Madison. She lives in Wetka, in the family mansion. I want to meet her, Camden. Camden's blood ran cold. Madison, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not, Camden? Is she going to threaten me too? Or perhaps offer me a generous sum of money to disappear and spare the Walsh family any further embarrassment? She might, Madison. My mother is complicated, and she is fiercely protective of our family. I can handle complicated, Camden. What I can't handle is cowardice. What I can't handle is being lied to, or kept in the dark by my own family. The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. Madison was testing him, pushing him to his limits, seeing if he would choose his family over her again. Okay, Madison, Camden said, meeting her gaze directly. I'll arrange a meeting between you and my mother. I will give you the opportunity to say what you need to say, and to ask the questions you want to ask. Good, Madison said simply. And Camden? Yes, Madison? If you disappoint me, Camden, if you choose them over me again, If you decide that this is all too complicated or inconvenient and you start to pull away, I will walk away from you and you will never see me again. I won't give you a second chance to break my heart." Camden looked at his daughter, brilliant, fierce, uncompromising, and realized that he was looking at the person he should have been if he had possessed the courage to fight for what truly mattered. "I understand, Madison," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "And Madison? Yes, Camden? Thank you, Madison. Thank you for giving me any chance at all. I know she didn't deserve it." "No," Madison stated, heading towards the door. "You don't, but maybe that's the essence of family. Offering chances to those who don't warrant them, hoping they'll finally choose the right path." After her departure, Camden was left alone in his opulent office, gazing out at the city he had conquered through the privileges afforded by his family name and connections. For the first time in his life, he was about to fight for something that truly mattered, and the fear of losing was paralyzing. The confrontation with Eleanor Walsh unfolded in the lavish sitting room of the Winnetka mansion, where Camden had spent his formative years. Surrounded by priceless oil paintings and Persian rugs passed down through generations, Madison sat opposite her estranged grandmother, her spine erect, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She was dressed for battle in a sharp black blazer and pearls, embodying the sophisticated young woman she had become, despite Eleanor's repeated attempts to erase her from the family history. "So," Eleanor began, her voice laced with disdain, "you're the cleaning woman's daughter." "I'm your granddaughter," Madison replied, her tone even. "Though I understand you've spent the last 21 years pretending I don't exist." Camden observed the exchange from his position near the grand fireplace, prepared to intervene if his mother's cruelty became unbearable. However, Madison seemed perfectly capable of holding her own. "Don't be ridiculous," Eleanor scoffed. "You're the product of my son's poor judgment and your mother's opportunism. Actually, I'm the result of two people who cared about each other deeply until you decided money held more value than family," Madison countered, her eyes flashing. "Money is what separates people like us from people like you." "You're right," Madison said with a subtle smile. "Money is indeed what sets us apart. You wield yours to inflict pain and control others. I intend to use my education to help those who have been victimized by families like yours." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Camden informed me that you've been accepted to Harvard Law School. A full scholarship, no less. How impressive. I presume you expect us to supplement your expenses." "I expect absolutely nothing from you," Madison stated firmly. "I came here to understand the kind of people who would choose money over their own grandchild. Now I know." Camden stepped forward, his presence a silent promise of support. "Madison is a mistake that should have remained buried," Eleanor said coldly, her words dripping with venom. "I paid a considerable sum to ensure this family wouldn't be embarrassed by your youthful indiscretion." "I am not an indiscretion," Madison retorted, her voice gaining a steely edge. "I am a person who graduated valedictorian, who is going to be a lawyer, and who will dedicate her career to fighting against people who believe their wealth elevates them above everyone else." "How noble and utterly naive," Eleanor sneered. "Is it naive to believe that people should be judged by their character rather than their bank account?" Madison challenged. "It's naive to think character matters more than breeding," Eleanor snapped. Madison laughed, a sound that was both beautiful and cutting. "Breeding, like the breeding that produced a son who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend? Like the breeding that led you to believe you could simply buy away your own granddaughter?" Eleanor's face flushed crimson with anger. "You have no right to speak to me in that manner." "I have every right," Madison insisted. "You're the woman who threatened to destroy my mother's life if she ever revealed who my father was. You are the reason I grew up believing I wasn't worth fighting for." "You weren't worth fighting for," Eleanor spat. "Neither was your mother." The cruel words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Camden saw Madison flinch imperceptibly, but her composure remained unbroken. "You know what's truly funny?" Madison said, her tone conversational. "I used to wonder what was wrong with me that led my father to abandon me. But after meeting you, I realized there was never anything wrong with me. There was something profoundly wrong with him for caring what you thought. She turned to Camden, who was witnessing the exchange with mounting shame and anger. Is this who you chose over us? This bitter old woman who believes money makes her superior to people who actually work for a living. Camden looked at his mother, the woman who had raised him to believe that wealth and status were the ultimate measures of success, who had threatened an innocent young woman to protect the family's image, who was now revealing her true colors to the granddaughter she had tried to erase. Madison, he said quietly, his voice thick with remorse, I'm sorry. I am so sorry that I was ever weak enough to let her opinions matter more than you and your mother. Don't apologize to her, Eleanor snapped. She's trying to manipulate you into giving her money. Actually, Madison said, standing tall, I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I don't want anything from your family except for Camden to understand what he relinquished when he chose you over us. She walked to the fireplace, where generations of Walsh family photos were proudly displayed. All these pictures of family gatherings, holidays, celebrations. I should have been in some of these photos, but you decided I wasn't good enough for your family album. You would never have fit in here, Eleanor said cruelly. You're right. I wouldn't have because I was raised to have values and integrity and compassion for other people. I was raised by a woman who worked 3 jobs to put food on our table instead of inheriting everything from her parents. Madison picked up a photo of Camden's college graduation, Eleanor beaming proudly beside him. You know what the difference is between this photo and my graduation yesterday? My mother was proud of me for what I accomplished, not for what I inherited. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? How did you handle the conflict? Tell me about it in the comments. Camden walked over to Madison and gently took the photo from her hands. You're right about all of it. I chose the wrong family 21 years ago, and I've been paying for it ever since. Camden, Eleanor warned, her voice rising in alarm. Don't let her emotional manipulation cloud your judgment. The only person who manipulated me was you, Mother, Camden stated, his voice firm. You convinced me that love was less important than money, that Valerie was beneath our family, that my own child was an embarrassment to be hidden. I protected this family's reputation. Eleanor exclaimed. You destroyed this family? Camden countered, his voice rising with each word. You cost me the woman I loved and 21 years with my daughter. You turned me into the kind of man who abandons pregnant women because it's inconvenient. Eleanor looked genuinely shocked by her son's rebellion. Camden, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in decades, Camden declared. Camden turned to Madison. I can't change the past. I can't give you back the childhood you should have had or the father you deserved. But I can choose differently now. What does that mean? Madison asked, her eyes searching his. Camden walked to his mother's antique secretary desk and pulled out a legal document he had brought with him. It means I'm changing my will. Half of everything I own is going to you. Not because you need it or want it, but because it should have been yours all along. Camden, no. Eleanor jumped to her feet, her face contorted with rage. You can't give half the family fortune to a stranger. She's not a stranger. She's my daughter, and she's already proven she's worth more than this entire family put together. Madison stared at the document in disbelief. I told you, I don't want your money. I know. That's why I trust you with it. Camden handed her the papers. Do whatever you want with it. Give it away. Use it to fund legal aid clinics. Burn it for all I care. But it's yours by right. This is insane. Eleanor sputtered. I won't let you destroy everything your father built. Dad built his fortune on the backs of working people he underpaid and tenants he overcharged, Camden said flatly. Maybe it's time that money went to someone who will use it to help those people instead of exploiting them. Madison looked at the will, then at Camden, then at Eleanor's furious face. You know what I want more than your money? She said finally. What? Eleanor asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I want you to call my mother and apologize. Really? Apologize? Eleanor scoffed. Yes, not just for abandoning us, but for letting your family terrorize her for 21 years. I want you to acknowledge the pain and hardship you caused her. Camden nodded, a look of grim determination on his face. Of course. And, Madison continued, her voice unwavering, I want you to come to my Harvard graduation in 3 years. I want you to witness what I accomplished despite your attempts to hold me back. I wouldn't miss it, Camden promised, his eyes filled with sincerity. And I want you to understand that earning my forgiveness is going to take time, Madison stated firmly. You can't just buy your way back into my life with guilt money and grand gestures. I need to see consistent effort and genuine remorse. Camden nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. I understand. Madison turned to Eleanor. And you, grandmother, I want you to understand that your granddaughter is going to be a lawyer who specializes in taking down wealthy families who abuse their power. Every time you read about another entitled rich person being held accountable for their actions, remember that you helped create the woman who's going to make that happen. Eleanor's face went white with rage. You ungrateful little. Careful, grandmother, Madison said smoothly, a hint of amusement in her voice. I might be recording this conversation. Wouldn't want your threats against your own granddaughter to end up on social media. The implication that Madison might be as calculating as Eleanor clearly disturbed the older woman. She sat back down heavily, looking older than her 75 years. Camden, she said weakly, her voice trembling. You're making a terrible mistake. No, mother. I made a terrible mistake 21 years ago. Today I'm finally doing something right. 3 months later, Camden stood in the kitchen of Valerie's modest apartment, helping her prepare dinner while Madison studied at the dining room table and her 15-year-old brother, Marcus, worked on homework in the living room. It had taken weeks of heartfelt conversations, sincere apologies, and patient relationship building. But Valerie had finally agreed to let Camden be a part of their lives, not as a savior or a benefactor, but as someone who genuinely wanted to know his daughter and make amends for his past mistakes. How's she doing at Harvard? Camden asked quietly, nodding toward Madison. Straight A's as usual, Valerie replied, a hint of pride in her voice. She joined the legal aid clinic and she's already working on cases involving housing discrimination. She's completely dedicated. Valerie smiled proudly. She's going to change the world. She already has. She changed mine. Valerie studied his face, her expression thoughtful. Do you really mean that? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? I mean it, Camden said, his voice sincere. Meeting Madison made me realize that I'd spent my whole life building wealth instead of building anything that truly mattered. Now I'm trying to figure out how to be worthy of being her father. And of you both. It's going to take time, Camden. Valerie cautioned gently. She's been hurt by your absence for 21 years. You can't fix that overnight. I know, Camden acknowledged, his eyes filled with remorse. But I'm hoping I'll have the rest of my life to try. From the dining room, Madison called out, Dad, can you help me with something? It was the first time she had called him Dad. And Camden felt tears spring to his eyes. Coming? He called back, his voice thick with emotion, as he walked toward his daughter, who was engrossed in law books that would help her fight for justice and equality. Camden realized he had finally made the right choice. It had taken him 21 years, but he had finally chosen love over money, family over status, and doing what was right over doing what was easy. Madison looked up as he approached and smiled. It was the same smile he saw in the mirror, but warmer, kinder, shaped by a mother's love and hard-earned wisdom. What do you need help with? He asked, his voice filled with love. I'm working on a case about a landlord who's trying to evict a single mother who can't afford rent increases. The landlord happens to be a real estate developer who inherited his business from his father. Camden winced, the case sounding uncomfortably familiar. And you want my perspective on how developers like that think? He asked, his voice strained. I want to understand how someone becomes so disconnected from basic human decency that they'd throw a family out on the street for profit. Madison explained, her eyes searching his. Camden sat down beside his daughter and looked at the case files. They become that way by being raised to think that money is more important than people. By being taught that poor people are poor because they deserve it, not because the system is rigged against them. Is that how you were raised? Madison asked, her voice soft. Yes, Camden admitted, his face etched with regret. And it took meeting you to understand how wrong that was. Madison studied his face, her expression thoughtful. Do you think people can really change, or do they just get better at hiding who they really are? I think people can change if they want it badly enough and if they have the right motivation, Camden said, his voice filled with conviction. What was your motivation? Madison asked, her eyes unwavering. Camden looked at his daughter, brilliant, determined. Everything he should have been if he had had the courage to choose love over legacy. You, he said simply, his voice filled with emotion. You were my motivation. Seeing what an incredible person you'd become despite my absence made me realize I had a choice. I could spend the rest of my life being the kind of man who abandons his family for money, or I could become the kind of man who deserves to be your father. Madison was quiet for a moment, then reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm glad you chose to change, even if it took you 21 years to figure it out. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. From the kitchen, Valerie called out, Dinner's ready. Marcus, turn off the TV and wash your hands. As the family gathered around the small dining table, so different from the formal dinners Camden had grown up with in the Winnetka mansion, he looked around at the faces of the people who had become his real family. Valerie, who had forgiven him despite having every reason not to. Marcus, who was slowly warming up to the idea of having a father figure after years of being the man of the house. And Madison, who had given him a chance he didn't deserve, and was teaching him what unconditional love truly meant. This was what wealth actually looked like, Camden realized, not the millions in his bank account or the properties in his portfolio, but this table full of people who cared about each other, who had chosen to be a family despite the odds against them. Dad, Madison said as they started eating, I've been thinking about the foundation money you want to set up. Camden had insisted on establishing a foundation in Madison's name, funded with half his fortune, to support legal aid clinics and civil rights organizations. What about it? He asked, his eyes focused on her. I want to make sure it helps families like ours, Madison said, her voice filled with passion. Single mothers who are working multiple jobs, kids who are brilliant but don't have the resources to reach their potential, people who are fighting against systems designed to keep them down. That sounds perfect, Camden said, nodding in agreement. And I want Mom to help run it. She understands what those families need better than any board of directors ever could. Camden looked at Valerie, who was trying not to cry. What do you think? I think, Valerie said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, that it would be an honor to help other families have the opportunities we never thought we'd get. Marcus looked up from his plate, his eyes shining with hope. Does this mean I can go to college without Mom working 3 jobs to pay for it? It means, Camden said, his voice filled with love, that you can go to any college you want, study whatever you're passionate about, and never worry about money getting in the way of your dreams. Cool, Marcus said, a wide grin spreading across his face. Can I study video game design? Madison laughed. You can study whatever makes you happy, little brother. As dinner continued with easy conversation and genuine laughter, Camden's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. I hope you're happy with your choice to destroy this family's legacy. Camden looked at the message, then at the family around his table. His real family, the one he had almost lost forever. He deleted the text without responding. Some legacies were worth destroying if it meant building something better in their place. 2 years later, Camden stood in Harvard Law School's graduation ceremony, watching Madison cross the stage to receive her diploma. This time, he wasn't hiding in the crowd or discovering her existence by accident. This time, he was in the front row with Valerie and Marcus, holding a sign that read, "Congratulations, Madison," and cheering loudly enough to embarrass his daughter in the best possible way. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, Madison found Camden standing apart from the crowd, looking emotional. You okay, Dad? She asked, her voice filled with concern. I'm perfect, Camden said, his eyes shining with tears of joy. I'm watching my daughter graduate from Harvard Law School, And I'm here for it this time. You know what the best part is? What? Madison asked, her smile radiant. I'm not the same person I was when we first met. Having you in my life, getting to know where I came from, understanding your family's history, has made me stronger, more determined to use my privilege responsibly. What do you mean? Madison asked, her curiosity piqued. Madison smiled. I mean, I've learned something from both sides of my family. From Mom's side, I learned that love and determination can overcome any obstacle. From your side, I learned that with great power comes great responsibility to use it for good. And now, I'm going to spend my career making sure that other families don't get torn apart by people who think money makes them untouchable. Starting with Walsh Properties. Camden raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Are you planning to sue me? Only if you don't voluntarily fix the problems with tenant rights and affordable housing in your buildings, Madison said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Consider them fixed, Camden said, his voice firm. Good, Madison said, her smile widening. Because I'd hate to have to destroy my own father in court. Camden laughed, pulling his daughter into a warm embrace. I love you, Madison. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I love you too, Dad, Madison said, her voice filled with affection. And I'm proud of the man you chose to become. As they stood together in the Harvard sunshine, surrounded by families celebrating their children's achievements, Camden thought about the journey that had brought them here. He had spent the first 46 years of his life building an empire based on money and status and family legacy. He had spent the last 2 years learning that the only legacy that mattered was the kind of parent you chose to be, the kind of love you chose to show, and the kind of person you inspired your children to become. What do you think defines a real family? Is it blood or the choice to love and support each other through everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Madison Walsh, she had legally changed her name to honor both sides of her heritage, would go on to become one of the most successful civil rights attorneys in the country. The Madison Walsh Foundation would help thousands of families escape poverty through education and legal support. And Camden would spend the rest of his life proving that some people really can change, even if it takes them decades to find the courage. But more importantly, he had learned that the greatest fortune he could ever accumulate was a daughter who respected him, a woman who had forgiven him, and a family that had chosen to love him despite his past mistakes. Some graduation days changed everything. Some daughters saved their fathers just by existing. And sometimes the people you thought you had lost forever were just waiting for you to become worthy of finding them again. Camden Walsh had finally graduated from the school of hard lessons into the life he was always meant to live. It had only taken him 21 years, one chance encounter at a graduation ceremony, and the courage to choose love over everything else, but it had been worth the wait. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.